What's up, everyone, and welcome into the Buffalo Sports Collective. It is Wednesday, August 28th, 2024. As always, I am PK alongside my co-host Phil. For episode 301, our journey to episode 600 has begun. Phil, how has your week been? We got a busy weekend coming up, Labor Day weekend. I'm guessing you're not off on Monday. I'll be off on Monday. But, yeah, it's an exciting time. Preseason's over. The 53-man rosters are out. Free agency officially opens for the NLL on Monday. It did get delayed again. We'll talk about that in a bit. But very busy weekend coming up. Our drafts are pretty much done. We drafted our final Guillotine one on Friday. It's coming to the end of these summer months. It definitely would have felt differently if we were still in, like, middle school, high school, elementary school, where end of August sports are starting back up for fall, but we're more than halfway through our off-season schedule, Phil. I don't know if you know that, but it seems like middle of November we're going to be back to 2 weeks now.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like bringing up the school days, that because we just work jobs nonstop, yep. There is no summertime off. I feel like fall is more exciting than it used to be. Used to be back to school. That's a bummer, although, like you just mentioned, school sports, played soccer in fall, loved it, so getting back to that was always great, but then you also had to couple that with going back to school, which was a bummer. But being an adult now that we are, there is no school, so time just kind of rolls on, but the excitement of football and fantasy football and all that comes with it actually is, I feel like fall is a much more exciting time than the slight dread of a new year for school, and but also the excitement of school sports. But overall excited, a lot going on. I think one of our friends mentioned that we will be hanging out, 7 weekends in a row now, which I know everyone doesn't know our friend group, but that's a lot, way more. I don't know the last time we hung out 7 weekends in a row. It's been very busy. We'll just put it that way, with that amount of hangout time. It's been fun, but yeah, we're not used to that. Maybe like once a month, I feel like we usually have something going on. 7 in a row is a lot. It might be more than that by the end of it, but we got exciting stuff coming up, and exciting. It's busy. It's very busy right now.
Yeah, like you said, 7 weekends in a row. It started with your wedding, and it's going to end with Tough Mudder, and not looking forward to that at all. I am not in shape and not ready to bust my butt for 10 to 12 miles with 26 obstacles in between. Not in shape. I think we went over it Tuesday when we're recording right now, so it would have been the 8th anniversary of our first ever Tough Mudder, and coming up on the 14th of September, it'll be most of ours 6th one, because we missed 2020 obviously because of COVID, 2021 because of my wedding, and 2022 we all just looked at each other and went, let's push it off one more year. Hopefully we'll get back into it. So we were back last year for our 5th. This year it'll be 6th, and not looking forward to it at all. My knees are hurting as I'm speaking now. So if you or anybody else that has ever run the Tough Mudder, let us know by following us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on X and Blue Sky, if anybody still uses that. Might have to chop that in Threads, because remember the whole ordeal about Twitter's going away? You have to join this. But we're still over there, Buffalo Sports Go. Don't forget to follow our channel wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube. I think I still got to preference that, because every once in a while people are still shocked that our mugs are on YouTube because of video, and we've been there for, over a year now? Close to over a year. Check out our website at buffalosportscollective.com. These intros are getting longer and longer because I'm finding other pieces to talk about. You can check out our store on our link tree on our social media sites. Just click that on the link tree and it'll take you right to the store, or at the top of the website by hitting that shop tab. You can represent the BSC on the go and look for the time breakdowns in the description of the show. There will be a few of these. This will be a very quick segment within the segment. We'll talk about the Bills versus Panthers game. Who cares? That's about all we really learned. I think the main talking points were they lost. Who cares? Frank Gore Jr. looked really good. I think he's got good juice. We'll talk about it in a second, but he was waived. He will have to go through waivers, and if he goes unclaimed, Buffalo would be smart to add him to their practice squad. I don't think he has enough speed, but he has enough elusiveness to be a decent running back, and you can get running backs wherever. But he went 18 for 101 and 1 touchdown. Joe Anderson, I think he's a solid backup. He made the team. Congratulations to him. We'll talk about that in a second. But he back-to-back good games. And then the one big negative, which was the only starter besides, Reed Ferguson and St. Martin to play. Both special teamers all started. Bass, first miss of the preseason. It was a 51-yarder, but still got to make it. And that was one where I think a lot of the radio guys and a lot of the other content creators were saying that they were hoping that the Bills were hoping that Bass would end the preseason perfect, and he wouldn't have been put in a position where he could have missed a shot, because yes, he's struggling in training camp and all the practices where it's been good some days and bad some days, but you could always hang your head on, hey, the preseason games, he's perfect. That's all that matters. Missed one. I'm not overly concerned about him because I've said this for a while now. Kickers have ebbs and flows, but it's a little concerning considering, and we've said it, and you pointed out. You're the first one to really point it out on this show, and I'll give you credit for it. The Bills are going to be in close games, and these kicking the kicking department could come in clutch or big time disappointment this year, and him missing that 51-yarder gives me a little bit more worried than I probably should be, but I guess we'll see as the season continues on. It's Tyler Bass watch, because he used to be clutch, and then we changed his nickname to something that we don't swear on the show, and I can't say.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously the focal point of that game, kind of, because, like you said, not a lot of the starters played. A lot of the focus of this upcoming season is going to be on him, whether he wants it or not. But the big thing, like we've heard a few rumblings of, well, why don't they go out and get a better kicker? They don't really exist as much as you would like them to. I understand that there's money tied up with Tyler Bass, but even if they could get out from the money, I mean, you're seeing other teams having kicking battles on their own teams and barely getting rid of players that are worse than Bass. So I think just the kicking, the people out there as kickers, there's just not many that are really, really good. Yes, some teams have some that are incredible, and then there's plenty of teams that have mediocre ones. And obviously, you want the Bills to have one of the better ones in the whole league. We don't know if they do right now. We'll see what kind of season he has. But even if he was bad, I just don't think it's going to take a lot to move on from him. I'll just put it that way. Like he's going to be your kicker. Whether he performs well or not, it's going to be really tough to move on from him unless he's really, really, really bad. I mean, if he, blows 3 straight close games in a season where we think there's going to be a lot of close games, then maybe he is on the chopping block a lot quicker than people expect. But I don't think there's a ton out there that are going to be a lot better than he is. And he still has a chance to be really good and still has a chance to rebound, like you mentioned, the ebbs and flow. I mean, 6 of 7, like you said, he only missed one. Yes, you'd like to go 7 of 7. Yes, that 51-yarder in a realistic game could mean a win or a loss, I think, this year. So that's going to be tough, but he's not going to be perfect the whole season. I mean, that's just near impossible. Yes, some are up there in the 93, 94, 95% and pretty much never miss, but I don't think that's exactly who he is. I think if you can get him close to 85 to 90%, that'd be really good for him. I think he's a career 83-ish percentage. But overall, other than that, yeah, like you said, I don't know if Frank Gore is going to make it to the practice squad, which would be a bummer. I hope he does. I hope he clears waivers and the Bills are able to bring him back. And then Andreessen, I think he is something the Bills need pretty badly right now. I mean, even if it's just depth at that position has had an insane amount of injuries over the last couple seasons. So it's one that they badly need depth at, and good for him. Like you said, feel good story. Last episode, we talked a little bit about it, but really great to see him make the team.
Yeah, I think 3 UB Bulls are now on the
which is pretty awesome.
53. But yeah, with Bass, they got 4 more years tied up with him. And
Yeah.
I think what would benefit him the most, and I know a lot of Bills fans are like, oh, game 1, please don't let this happen, but a game-winning field goal against Arizona in week 1 where he just nails it right down the middle. Kickers are a special breed. They're kind of like goalies. They're kind of like pitchers. They're the oddballs that have weird.
How dare you?
Well, I'm semi goalie too, like in co-ed recreation. I was never like your level of goalie, so I did have weird tendencies. But I had weird tendencies in basketball. I had weird tendencies in volleyball. I was kind of those weird ball guys as well. So I think what he needs to get in a better headspace is a game-winning, 50-yard field goal to win the game. Where if he doesn't make it, they lose. If he makes it, they win. So it's like a 2-point, 1-point game. His kick ends it at the end of the game. If he nails that, I think you get a good Tyler Bass. If he misses it, you got to start wondering, oh, no, who's out there? Who can we possibly go get? But, yeah, when the last preseason game, and we're talking about a kicker, that's why we don't really worry about preseason too much. But what we will worry about here is the 53-man roster. We can kind of fly through this because a bunch of people are going to be talking about it. But, it came out around, I think it locked at 4 o'clock, and I think the Bills released it around like 5:15, maybe 5:30-ish. But a couple things stood out to me, and I don't know if anything really stood out to you. Evans and Milano started out the season on the IR. Both are designated to return from IR. I think that's a good thing for Milano. It means that there is a chance that he can return this year. I think that's a good thing there. And again, a big reminder here, this is the initial 53. A lot of things can happen. They can go sign somebody and chop somebody else. They can go fix somebody through waivers. The practice squad's going to be beaten filled up in the next few hours. So a lot of people that are listening to this, there might already be changes. There's a name or two out there that we might toss out there that we might be interested in. But really, the numbers on the defense are a bit shocking to me. 6 defensive ends, including Tuhill, who really didn't do much, but he came in with not high expectations, but he was a name to keep an eye on in camp. And, he's been hurt most of it, so you haven't got much of it. 6 linebackers. That includes it doesn't include Matt Milano, who's on the IR. So I think that also adds into it, but it also adds into the new kickoff routine, or not routine, but the new system out there. I think a lot of that, they want bigger bodies out there to tackle these guys when they're going up against it. So you're going to see a lot less gunners of wide receivers and cornerbacks out there, and more like linebackers, athletic freaks, like, a Dorian Williams type of player. So bigger bodies out there. 6 cornerbacks, and I know one of them is a more quote-unquote return man than a cornerback, but he's labeled as cornerback. And then 5 safeties. They loaded up on the defensive side of the ball, and the biggest thing that stood out to me is that with all the numbers that they put on the defensive side of the ball, there's just currently 5 wide receivers in this room right now, and 2 of them are currently injured. I think that's good indication that they're probably going to be back in Samuel and MVS, but going into the season with a already questionable on the lower side with strength of wide receiver across the entire NHL, or entire NFL. I'm already thinking about the NHL, and I do not want to be. But starting with just 5 out there, it's a little concerning. And I know that the depth in that room wasn't very strong. You were talking about Shavers possibly making it. Claypool before he got injured and cut. You were talking about, did KJ Hamler make the team? Dean Cain was one of the final cuts reported for the wide receiver room. But just 5, it tells me that might be an area where they're looking to see who was chopped, who they can add to the room. But going in with 5 on the season, that is not something that I would have expected, and it's not something that they possibly can do, in my opinion.
Yeah, I hope so. This team, I don't know if it's simply because I'm just ready for the season to start and see what this team actually has, but the longer that this offseason goes on, the scarier this team looks to me, and not in a good way. I think we've just had even longer to dissect it and just really look at it, see what other teams are doing, see what this team's doing. And just the biggest thing that stood out to me was some teams making deals and the Bills just not doing anything. I don't know. It just feels weird. And like you said, it's not official or anything. I mean, there's still plenty of time to make moves. There's still, like you said, a few players out there that could be interesting for the Bills. But even some of these teams that are throwing, 6th, 7th round picks at other teams just to make sure they get their guy, and the Bills not doing anything for a roster that looks like it could use some serious help, especially in the wide receiver room. And even Tim Patrick just got signed by Detroit. I mean, who knows if the Bills were in on that at all, but it seems like a pretty quick flip to their practice squad. I mean, something like that would have been nice. I don't know if he would have done a ton here, but the wide receiver room I don't know, seems brutal right now. I mean, Coleman, they said, is coming along very slowly. Shakir is great, but he's just not an alpha. And then Samuel, like you said, coming off turf toe, even if he is healthy, how healthy is he? And he's not practicing right now or anything, so that doesn't look good. MVS, he scares the heck out of me. I mean, he had drops already in preseason, and Kansas City couldn't make it work. So if they can't make it work, I assume that nobody can. I don't know. I hope they do something for the wide receiver room. I know you got a guy to mention, but that's the biggest thing to me, I think. I mean, all the load up on defense makes sense in the way that, again, the injuries are just flying around over there. I mean, the safety injuries, the linebacker injuries, it seems to be that that's the side of the ball where they're injured the most outside of the couple of wide receivers. So it makes sense early on, at least, like you said, initial 53, lots of changes could be happening. Maybe that's an area where they have a guy in the bubble that they kept for now because they didn't want him to go to waivers, but maybe he's the next to be chopped if they find somebody else that they like more. We'll see. I think just the next, 48 hours will be very interesting to see if anything else kind of happens and trickles down.
Yeah, I'll try to tie my point up in a nice little bow here, and it's something that a lot of other people have mentioned, so I don't really have to talk too much into it, but a guy like a Noah Brown, who was just flat out cut because he's got enough years of experience out there, so he doesn't have to pass through waivers. Last year with the Texans, first off, he's 28 years old, 6'2". Last year with the Texans, his first year, spent the first 5 years with Dallas, 10 games, 33 receptions on 55 targets, 567 for 2. And he was not the alpha in there. He was behind the likely Dalton Schultz. He was behind Devin Singletary was there. Joe Mixon's there now. Just in the receiving department as well. And then he also had Nico Collins and Tank Dell in the wide receiver room that he was behind. So it was a bit shocking that they released him because he had just signed a new deal with him in the offseason. I was hoping Buffalo would kind of take an eye on him, but he would be the number one on my list. I know there's a Terrence Marshall sighting out there. He has to pass through waivers though. Will he even reach Buffalo? It would be very shocking if he went down all the way to 28, where the Buffalo Bills pick. Being a former second-round pick, but he does have a lot of experience and play time with Joe Brady. But Noah Brown is an easy fit that would fit this team and instantly move up to wide receiver 4, maybe wide receiver 3 on this team, depending on where you view Coleman. I think he would jump ahead of MVS. I think he would probably jump ahead of Matt Collins, and I think he would possibly jump ahead of Keon Coleman right now. I think he would slide in right next to Samuel and Shakir. So that would be a number one name on my board if I was looking to add anybody that was chopped today. And there's still a ton more names. I think I saw over like 980 names were released today. So a lot of them are going to be getting practice squad spots. But again, this is the initial 53. It could and possibly will still change in the next, like you said, 48 hours.
Yeah, Marshall Jr. is the other one. I mean, you already mentioned him a little bit. I also don't think he would make it all the way down to 28. He's the one that, to me, it's hard to tell because he's in the Panthers, who were the worst team in football last year and are gearing up to be not very good again. So it's hard to tell if the player's bad, the team's bad, both. But he's the kind of player that, again, the Bills, why not take that shot? I mean, their wide receiver room is not very good right now. So why not take a chance on him if he does become available? But like you mentioned, former second-round pick not that long ago. I'm sure he will not make it that far down. The other one that I saw that was released that could be interesting for the Bills, just given what's going on in their safety room, especially with injuries, was Jonathan Abram from the Saints. He was fighting for a starting spot. He was a depth safety for them last year. They re-signed him on a 1 year, expected him to be depth again, and seemed to be a surprise cut from that team. So he's another one. I know they already have 5 safeties, but again, there's a lot of injuries in that room right now and could probably use some more experience or just possibly better depth within that room. So he's another one that could be interesting to keep an eye on.
So like we said, there's a lot of other content creators that will be diving into this way more than us. Cover One's a great example. They do excellent work over there. But we just sprinkle in our own opinions on the 53. And next week, It will be our traditional and annual bold prediction show. So Phil and I will both toss out 3 predictions. We'll kind of review what we did last year, and we'll see if we can top what we did last year. But bold predictions on the next show before they start off the season next week, Sunday, versus the Cardinals at 1 o'clock. Phil, I don't know if you saw, we'll talk about it really, really quick, the new big screen that's going up at the KeyBank Center.
I did.
There's a lot more work that's going to be done and needs to be done by KeyBank Center, but that screen was majorly needed, and it's a big sucker in there, and I absolutely love that it's like a cube and that it's got no corners. Absolutely love it. Can't wait to see it in person. And sitting up in the press box is it's going to probably make me go blind because I'm probably going to be eyesight with it, but I love the new big screen that's going into KeyBank Center.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see the pictures of it up. It's really hard to judge how big it is when it's on the ground. I mean, even with the person walking by, it looks massive, but I mean, it should, I assume, looking with it on the ground. I don't know how big the old one looked if it was on the ground. But the fact that they're getting that close is very exciting. And in general, like you said, love the wraparound feel of it. You're missing that aspect of it from the old one, which is really good. It's a positive thing you're missing. I'm interested to see what they do for underneath it, where a lot of the stuff used to come. I mean, we used to have the goat head with the, smoke coming out. Will they do anything at all for the Bandits? Just curious to see, where the next steps go for it. But in general, like you said, it's an upgrade and a pretty big one for that arena that desperately needs a lot of help. But we'll take this for now, and it'll be really great to see the banner raising for the Bandits on a new screen.
100%. So we will move on to the weekly installment of the Mad Matty Minute. Hopefully by next show we'll get some kind of word, because it will be September, Matt Vince. It will be September. I've been doing this for 3 months now, but if you haven't
just racking it up.
Every Wednesday, until we get word on Mad Vince and his plans, I am offering my services to entice him back. And the list is very long. I'm cleaning up after his animals. I'm returning his packages. I'm getting him food. So that's 3. Water boy, gardener, charger boy, light guy, insult fam, spammer Sam, clearance Clarence, birthday Brad, spotter Potter, and this is lucky number 13 service I'm offering to him. Phil, rain can ruin your day. From plans being changed to messy yards, bad road conditions, but to me, the worst thing about rain is when your clothes get wet. So, Mr. Matt Vince, I will be there for when it rains for you. I will have the umbrella there. I will have a change of clothes. If for some reason you get wet, I will have a pair of shoes that you can change into if your socks get wet. I will be your dry Dave.
Yeah, someone who occasionally does outdoor work and has for a while now. I used to be a receiver, and I used to have to go outside a lot, and the building I used to work at had these like water runoffs from the roof, and it would literally just be like a waterfall where I had to walk, and I always wore mesh shoes, and it really ruins your day. Really ruins your day, especially when it happens, 6, 7, 8 in the morning, and you have to spend the rest of your day just soaked, waiting to dry. I think before I have taken a rubber band and like a plastic bag, which isn't good for your foot, but put that in my shoe instead of having to walk around with wet shoes and socks. It helped. Probably not good overall for my feet, but for just, that one day, it was helpful. But yeah, that would be fantastic if somebody was there to umbrella or change of clothes. Now I do have a change of clothes at work because I gave up on having to deal with that. But my other question for you, do you come up with the alliteration before you, are you just coming up with alliterations and then say that would be a good job?
No, that just goes with it.
So you come up with the plan and then try to figure out how to make an alliteration with it.
Yeah, and for those of you who have not been noticing, the last, hang on, let me scroll back up. It has been the last, I scrolled right past it. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the 5th straight one where I've come up with a fancy name like this because it's getting out of hand. But what I'm hearing you say is this could be the one that puts him over the edge and says, yeah, I'm back. I fully assume he's coming back. All the signs indicate he's coming back. He's just milking this at this point. That's all I can tell is he's just milking this, and I'm not.
And the best thing is they don't have to sign him. So, like you said a while ago, this could drag on until
could drag on
practice.
Until they release the actual roster and he's there.
Right.
I mean, there's no stopping him from going there, practicing, and just going, hey, I'm not going to do this year, and then retiring in December. Like, I could be doing this until December, but yeah, that's this week's installment. Maybe.
What are you going to do if you have to do this when we have 2 episodes a week?
I hadn't thought about that, so thanks a lot, Phil. And as we dwell on this, what we won't dwell on is our first sponsor of the show, which is Tap That Tap Room.
Oh, I was caught off guard. Tap That Tap Room's at 363 Delaware Street in Tonawanda, New York. They are Buffalo's first women-owned self-pour bar, featuring 30 consistently rotating taps of a variety of beers, ciders, sours, seltzers, and malt beverages.
So if you're watching on YouTube, I actually finally put their logo above my head. They've been our longest sponsor, our first sponsor. I don't know why I'm just thinking about doing this now, but from now on, they'll be above my head on the big screen, and which is not really a big screen. But Wednesday, weekly trivia with Geeks Who Drink starting at 7:30, and then Thursday is the karaoke starting at 7:30. Friday, the 30th, live music with both Eric Weinholtz and Nelson Rivera at 8 p.m. And then don't forget, not this Sunday, but the following Sunday is the first Bills game, which means it's the first watch party with the sound on. There will be player of the game. What that means is if you wear that player's jersey to the watch party, you will receive a free gift. You have to be wearing that player's jersey. Don't be showing up in a different jersey and expecting this free gift. It's going to be a different player every week. Make sure you go stock up on all those jerseys. Then the halftime jersey giveaway, maybe you can use that one for a future player of the game. But for any other posted event, check out their Facebook page. And to find out what's on tap and what's on deck, check out tapthattaproom.com. Phil, Adam Levy has been a very busy boy. I don't know why there's nobody else that wants to assist him. He's, like you said, he's been our savior, our saving grace. He's been the only one that's been put out. There's other people that are putting out news, but I think Adam Levy is the Adam Schefter of the NLL, and thank God for him, because otherwise we would not be knowing what the heck's going on. Before we even dive into that, we've been talking about the national teams, so I think it's important to note that Tehoka Nanticoke and Adam Bomberry made the Haudenosaunee national team, which are going to be playing along with everybody else in Utica in September. So another 2 Bandits added to the list. You know, we went over a bunch of them last week. Haudenosaunee finally just announced their 23. They're absolutely stacked as well, and Nanticoke and Bomberry are going to be a part of it.
Yeah, and like you just mentioned, I mean, a lot of these teams are stacked, but that is another just stacked roster. This is pretty much, like you said, it's. I know you mentioned the Canadian team being. I do not know what's going on with me. The Canadian team being like the all-star team to kind of watch, but this whole entire tournament is going to be just one big all-star tournament. Like if you wanted an all-star game for the NLL, just watch this tournament and you get to see the best of the best go at it in a very competitive, even arguably better than an all-star game situation. It's going to be great, and I really hope that ESPN does stream it. We have no news on that yet, but again, last time it was a week before they started the tournament that ESPN announced it was going to be streaming, so hopefully they do something similar or announce it sooner. But this team was stacked. The rosters we've seen that have been released have been stacked with a lot of Bandits players. It's going to be a really, really great tournament and should be fun to watch.
Yeah, Haudenosaunee, U.S., and Canada are all in the same pool. I still have to read how that works, but if it's anything like the World Cup, this is just stupid to put all 3 of these teams in the same pool. It's
agreed.
It's NLL All-Star on steroids. That's what this tournament's going to be. So, congratulations to both Nanticoke and Bomberry and the rest of the Bandits that are going to be playing, and then pretty much all the other players, because it's going to be a massive, massive tournament. Like we were mentioning earlier, Adam Levy just dropping knowledge after knowledge. It does sound like I think Michael Carvelis from Daily Dive dropped this one, so I'll give him the credit this one. But it does sound like the season's going to be starting a week earlier than normal, which will be the weekend of Thanksgiving. I don't know how I feel about this. I don't know if it's officially going to happen, but Michael Carvelis has been top-notch on all these reports that he puts out as well. But I'm not the biggest fan of it because there will be a lot of people that aren't able to attend these games because of the holiday. A lot of people travel on these, but you know, it could mean more for expanding playoffs. It could mean that the season, I guess it doesn't mean the season's going to be longer because we already applied for our season tickets and it's 99 again, so that's not going to expand. But maybe we'll get our wish where, the first round is not just a one and done because they are adding another week to this. Or it could just mean there's another week built in, so there's not as many back-to-back for some of these teams. There's another week that you can have arena availability for some of these other teams in there. So we'll see what this means for the overall landscape of the NLL.
Yeah, long story short, I do hope they explain why, if exactly what you were saying. I mean, you're kind of speculating, which is fair. They won't, no, but I hope that they explain a little bit of why they did this. And the bigger thing is when the schedule does come out, is it a full start or is it one of those kind of soft starts where there's like, 2 games this weekend, but the real season kind of kicks off the weekend after with everybody playing? They do that sometimes. I think they did it last year, that there was like a weekend where only a couple teams.
3 teams not playing, and Bandits were one of them in week 1 last year.
Maybe that's what it was. Yeah, maybe it was just the Bandits had it kind of off. So maybe we'll see if it's something similar with this, that, just a handful of teams, maybe they wanted to start the week after, but the arenas weren't available.
Last year.
10?
Yep.
So most of the league. So we'll see. I mean, we'll see what this ends up being. I don't like it as a concept. Like you said, if it gets explained that it's for playoffs or it's so teams don't have to play multiple weekends. We know that the NLL is lower in the arena availability, so they don't get as much priority there. So, I mean, if that's another reason, fine. If the Bandits play on it, I don't think I'm going to be thrilled, especially if it's the championship banner raising. I think I'll actually be pretty upset because a lot of people travel for Thanksgiving, so if it's the home game for the banner raising and you're doing it Thanksgiving weekend, I think you're going to have a lot of upset fans.
So the next news that dropped, and we announced it, well, not announced it, we talked about it in the last show that, the Philadelphia Wings were the ones that broke the news that the draft is going to be on September 15th. But Adam Levy, for whatever reason, he put it in the thread instead of on the main tweet. It's going to be
I think he was answering.
Virtual.
He was answering a question.
He was answering a question, but I feel like that should have been in the original tweet. Adam, come on, man. You hid the
He's doing the best he can.
Not only is it virtual, but it's going to be live streamed. So the thing that we were complaining about last week must have gotten to Brett Frude because they're actually streaming the draft this year. First time since 2001. It being virtual
21?
is not that big of a deal for me. It's 2024. I think a lot of the leagues are going to end up going this way because it saves money on travels. You don't have to fly all these players out there. You don't have to fly all the teams here. I think it'll be easier for all these players and these teams to actually be in their if they even have it, war rooms to talk about these drafts and have the research right in front of you. But I'm not that big on if it's virtual or in person. Who really cares to me? It's about it being live streamed, and he also announced that there's going to be good announcers on this. I'm guessing Teddy Jenner's probably going to be a part of it. Maybe Steven Stamp's going to be a part of it because he's one of the big ones for the prospects coming up. So I'm interested to see who's going to be the announcers, but I'm psyched that it's actually going to be live streamed because these players deserve to have the opportunity to have their names announced, that they're officially in the NLL on NLL teams for something they worked their entire lives for. That's all I wanted. It's less about me, more about them, but I am included because I want to see about these the draft in general instead of just following updates on Twitter or X and then they're follow along on NLL.com. Nobody cares. We want to watch it.
I would say, but it's also a little bit about you as well.
Bit. It's always a little bit about me.
But yeah, I mean, I don't care about the virtual aspect of it. I mean, a ton of the NFL prospects that don't go to the draft, you get that little cutaway of them getting the phone call or just the video of them. I do hope they do that for at least some of the players that we get to, like you just mentioned, get to see their names called, even if we don't get to see them necessarily in a building, and maybe they won't do anything like that. Maybe they'll just get to see their name called in general and have to kind of share that moment privately. But hopefully some of them are on cam and they can figure out how to get a phone or a webcam set up. And I feel like it might be a lot for the NLL to get that going. But especially with the NLL being a smaller league, I have no problem with it being virtual. But the fact that it's live streamed is fantastic. The fact that they're going to have announcers who, like we said in the last show, explaining these picks that 95% 5% of the league probably has never heard of. It's really great to see that and just kind of explain to these fans that want to know about the player that they just selected, who he is, what's going on, how he can impact the team, what they're missing, all that kind of stuff. It's great to see that kind of information, and we see it even with the NHL draft. I mean, even the later rounds of the NFL draft. Like, you don't know half of these players because there's so many that get drafted, and it's just great to hear how that player is going to come in and affect your team. Really excited that's live streamed, and like you said, I think we're just going to take all the credit because we can.
Yeah, we were NLL commissioner last week, and this is
and we made it happen.
Official decrees.
Yeah,
so
you're welcome.
It happened. But the last bit of NLL news here before we start talking about other stuff, and last show we pretty much broke apart the Panther City Lacrosse Club, and we drafted their players to other teams. And apparently we spoke a little bit too soon, but we were just going on news that we had at that point. Tough breaks for anybody that really cared about that part of it. And I was going to say something else, but I remembered I can't really swear on this. I usually have a saying about that, and I was like, I got to stop myself because I can't say that on
I
the
could
show.
tell. You were buffering for a moment.
NLL's still in a freeze. That's why I did that. But news on Panther City Lacrosse Club. And again, thank you, Adam Levy, for breaking this news. It does sound like, and nothing's official yet, because why would the league put anything out? And I kind of understand that to a point, but they're letting a lot of rumors and stuff go on where they could have just like hushed it. We're saying like, hey, Panther City is in this position. We're working on this. We'll not comment any further. We'll update it more when we have more conclusive stuff. But why would you do that? They just pushed the free agency back another few days, which it is now officially Monday, which is Labor Day, the 2nd at 12 p.m. I think that'll be the final push, because if it wasn't, I feel like they would have pushed it like a week or two rather than just a handful of days. So I fully expect them to open free agency on the 2nd. But it does sound like Panther City is moving to North Carolina and Rowling. Now, does that mean that they sold? I would assume that means they sold. I would assume that doesn't just mean that they're relocating. Now, I have not seen any news about the team actually selling. It's more just about relocation. There was news that maybe the league would have the team for a year until they find a full-time buyer for this team. So I'm assuming that this means that somebody bought the team, but that has not been officially announced yet. I haven't seen anybody even rumor that has happened. I've just been seeing location. But I think that's a good thing for the league. We kind of talked about that last week where, is this good for the league that, this team is folding? No, obviously it's not good to see a team fold, but getting them out of that situation is a good situation where, they were averaging, 2,000 or 3,000 fans in that arena. Moving to North Carolina, we'll see what kind of reception they get this year. But I think in total, I will give NL credit here. Them pushing free agency a full month, I think, was a good thing. I didn't like it because it seemed last minute, and this whole thing seems like they're rushing it, but I think to keep it 15 teams is the right move. My only issue was them being so hush-hush about everything, just saying, hey, free agency was supposed to open on August 1st. We're not going to tell anybody that was the case, but now it's not opening until the 29th. And then, hey, now we're not opening until the September 2nd. So I hats off to them for being able to do this, finding an ownership group for Panther City and moving it so they have a little bit more time to prepare for this going over. But just a little bit more transparency is all we're talking about. Congrats to Panther City for, I guess I should say, for the 15th team in the NLL to stick around, because they're not going to be called Panther City anymore. But credit to Brett Frude and the whole front office in the NLL for finding a buyer, quote-unquote buyer. I have to put all quotes around this because we're not positive yet. But for being able to save a young, promising team in Panther City and not seeing it go to this dispersory draft where all these players go all over the country. I think the biggest thing here is to find out, hey, with this team moving across country to the East Coast now, what does that mean for some of these players? Are they not going to be able to commit to playing in North Carolina? Will there be a bunch of deals? What does this mean for Callum Crawford? But a huge, huge break for the NLL finding a possible buyer for this team and moving it to North Carolina.
Yeah, we mentioned it a lot last week with that draft and just kind of the negativity around a dispersal draft. Not only are you losing a team, but we already mentioned it. There's so many players trying to break into this league. We talk about it with the Bandits all the time. They have 19,000 draft picks and pretty much no roster space for any of them. And it's like that for other teams as well. So if you had a dispersal draft, you're trying to break up an entire team to add an additional likely solid player to these teams, and that kicks off another player that team could have brought in to that organization that now doesn't get that opportunity. So overall, just really excited if they are able to accomplish this and keep that team together. Levy did say that Frood has been working tirelessly to get the deal officially done, so it does kind of sound like a selling the team kind of deal. Again, like you said, quotes over everything, nothing's official, but if they are able to move to North Carolina, I think that would be cool, especially some people were saying the rivalry with Georgia would be a good time. A lot of people from Buffalo have relocated to North Carolina. It seems to be a really big hot spot for New Yorkers to relocate if they want to go south. So I think my brother, I'd already told him that there was rumor that a team might be going near him and that if the Bandits play them, he can go enjoy a Bandits game closer to where he lives. So I do oddly think that would be a great place for Bandits fans to have a team relocate to as well, because I'm sure there's plenty of them down there. So it'd be a good time, and I do hope that that is what happens. Like you said, the biggest thing is just keeping that team together, whatever that means. And originally I thought the league owning them possibly for a little while would be really weird, but at the same time I get just trying to keep that team together until they find an owner, like you just mentioned, without having to rush it. But if they do find this owner and it does work out, really good job by Frood to be hustling, it seems like, as much as he has, and trying to make it so this team does not have to disperse, which would be really, really great for the league. So if they are able to keep this together, Frood did an excellent job trying to, like you said, we definitely want the transparency of what is going on a little bit more, but if he's able to keep this team together, huge hats off to him to be able to do so.
Yeah, and it avoids the black eye of the league losing another team. And there was
and Levi did say, not to cut you off, but he did say that, like, even in this process, even if the team didn't go to some of these areas, it sounded like there was a lot of interest around the entire country for a team, but you're trying to take a team that's already kind of formed and you're trying to rush it for this season. So it seems like it was also a weird but positive, like, canvas of who might want a team, but a lot of these other potential prospect owners probably didn't want to be, thrown into the fire, kind of take this team quick. We need them before free agency. But really good, like he mentioned, to even just see that there is interest around the country for this league. I think that's also positive, even if a lot of them didn't come through. I mean, this is a really hectic situation to try to quickly own a franchise of a professional team. So
yeah, 100%. So if this does come down the wire and they announce everything and everything's all good, and the Panther City stays in the league and they become North Carolina, whatever they're going to become, huge hats off to Brett Frood and the whole front office of the NLL for being able to get this done, because I doubted it from like 2 weeks on until the rumors of, I think it was like later on Friday that Levy was starting to put out, hey, there's serious interest that there could be a big news drop coming up pretty soon. So very, very good news, especially with Monday, where that was the deadline of a possible dispersal draft coming out on Tuesday. When it didn't happen, I think that's good news and a bright future moving forward for a league that has had a lot of black marks in history. So to avoid this one and have some positive news, it's a great thing. So NL, they did push free agency, like I mentioned, to Monday, which means it's still going to happen and open before our next show, just a smaller window. But there are some big names still out there. There's Keegan Ball. Callum Crawford still got offer the franchise tag from Panther City that carries with them. Does he want to move to North Carolina? Where's the possible opening there? Austin Stotts, Rob Hellier, Ben McIntosh, Randy Stotts, Stephen Keogh, Josh Currier, Dan Lintner. Those are just the righty forwards. For the lefty forwards, you got Ryan Benesh. Is he coming back? Dane Doby, does he go back to San Diego, or does he decide to hang it up or go elsewhere? Zach Greer, who came out of retirement to go to Vegas, does he come back? Chris Wardell, Logan Schuss, those are the lefty forwards for a transition. Now, there's not a ton, but there's Joey Capito, Jeremy Thompson are the two big name transition players. For the defense, there's a bunch of them. Chad Tutton, Tor Reinhold, Damon Edwards, Jeff Cornwall, Brett Medisk, is he going back to Vancouver? Sheldon Burns, Leo Storos is the only Albany one. And then for the goaltending goaltenders, there's literally 2 big name ones out there, and they're not even huge names. Aaron Bold, does he decide to come back at being 39 years old? Tyler Carlson, does he go back to Colorado being 36 years old? So there are some bigger name players, some more veteran players out on the free agency market. I can see a lot of them signing, pretty much right when free agency opens or within the 24 hours. It'll be where they go and do they change teams. And that is something that you mentioned, hey, that we're going to keep track of this year so we can use for the information next year. Once you hit free agency, do you sign back here with your team or do you move elsewhere? But there are some bigger name players, and I think Austin Stotts, Rob Hellier, and Randy Stotts are the clear top names on there, just being 30 and 32 years old, respectively, through there. So there are some veteran names out there, but there are some younger players that are still in their prime that are hitting the free agency mark.
Yeah, before we go over that, I think I have some listed in the next segment, so I'm just going to kind of kick it over to you to move on. There are some big ones for sure, and it'll be interesting more than anything to see, I mean, obviously what the Bandits do, but also, like you just mentioned, what other teams do, who goes where. Is there actually any kind of movement, or does everybody just kind of return to the teams they were already on? I mean, we saw some bigger movement last year with teams or players kind of swapping and going to different teams a little bit here and there. It's not something that happens all that often in the NLL, especially because of just everything that an NLL player has to go through. We've mentioned it a lot of times. They like to kind of go back to that same team because that's likely where they are rooted. And moving is not easy for a player in this kind of league. So oftentimes they end up seemingly to go back to the same team, but I think it is going to be interesting whether it's the Bandits or any other team, a lot of their competitors, are they going to be able to pick up any big free agent names? But I have a couple for the next segment.
Yeah, and it's also important to remember that along with free agency opening up on Monday at noon is trades open up as well. And these teams have been sitting on their hands for the last month not being able to do anything because they've been in the freeze. But what we're going to be doing here is finishing off building our 21-man active roster and our 4 practice squad spots. So we're going to be doing that with the current roster. We're going to be doing that with trades. We're going to be doing that with free agency. We're going to be building what we were supposed to be building the last show before free agency opened in August, but everything changed here. So, the team's pretty much locked in. I think there are quite a few players that are locked into their roles. I think with the righty forwards, Smith, Frazier, and Nanakoke are coming back. With the lefty forwards, you got Byrne and Kluch are coming back. Transition, Ian McKay and Nick Weiss are locked into deals. Defense, you got Priolo, Cam Wires, Zach Belter, Dylan Robinson still needs a new deal, but his rights are still with the team. You got Justin Martin, who re-upped. Paul Dawson and Matt Spanger, who also re-upped. And then with the goalies, right now Matt Vince is still under contract, Steve Orelman's under contract, and Evan C's under contract. You also have Sam LaRue, who's under contract. You have Justin Robinson, whom I think Chase Frazier and Chris Cloutier all got qualifying offers. You got Bucky, who's a free agent, UFA. You got Brandon Robinson, who's an RFA. You got Connor Farrell still under contract. You still got Frank Brown, who's an RFA. You got a lot of players here, but the majority of them are locked in. I think for the most part, I have 1, 2, 3 openings on my 20-man roster. How many openings do you have that are going to be different names than the names that we saw last year on your 21-man roster?
I think just 2.
2? Okay, so you got 19 normal names. So I guess we can start with the righty forwards. Who are your righty forwards to start off with your 21-man roster?
They are, as expected, I don't know what's going on. Smith, Fraser, Nanakoke, and if he returns, it's Buchanan. This is where one of my players was. We've talked about him in the past, and he is a player that I think could step in for Buchanan if Buchanan hangs it up, and that is Rob Hellier, who you just mentioned multiple times. Similar profile of a player, was an assistant captain or both, has that kind of just veteran leadership even though he's 32. He has the assists, not necessarily the goals, so he's kind of that secondary piece on a team, so he doesn't necessarily need to be, the ball hog. He's someone who likes to feed other players, but still put up a lot of points. He was one of the free agents that had the most loose balls, which is something that Buchanan is well known for, so he's that similar just style of player, that leader, that scrappy player, that righty forward. So I do think if Buchanan hangs it up, I think Hellier would be an immediate fantastic addition. But if Buchanan is willing to come back, I am absolutely willing to take him back.
Yeah, I have the same four. I got Dane Smith, Chase Frazier, Nanakoke, and Buchanan on my righty forwards. I think it's also important to preference this. Just because a player signs a deal with this team does not mean they're going to be making this team. There are cuts, there are training camp, there are preseason games that they still have to get through before they make these decisions with the 20-man roster. There's 4 practice squad players as far as we know. There's a holdout. There's injuries from, there's still games going on with these summer leagues right now. A lot of them are in playoffs right now. So there are a lot of things that can be transpiring that affects the 21-man roster. So just because you see some names signed with this team does not mean they're going to be making this team. We saw it a lot last year as well, where, hey, who the heck is this player? Like, how are they going to find a spot on this team? It sometimes is just bringing guys in to get to know them, bringing them for camp bodies so you don't have to run your main guys into the ground. But those are my 4 as well, with Smith, Frazier, Nanakoke, and Buchanan. For the lefty forwards, who you got?
Byrne, Cloutier, Brandon Robinson, run it back.
Me as well. Again, Kluch and Frazier still have to sign their deal for their qualifying offers, and Brandon Robinson's an RFA, so he needs a new deal as well. But those are my 3 lefty forwards as well. And then the other question is, and we talked about it a lot in the offseason as well, but if Buchanan does not return and he does decide to hang it up or sign elsewhere, or Buffalo just for some reason doesn't offer him a deal, doesn't mean that there's going to be 4 righties. They could have 4 lefties as well. So I do expect them to have 7 forwards. It's, hey, if Buchanan does not come back, if Brandon Robinson does not come back, do they go heavy lefty or heavy righty? So that's another big thing to come into the market here. For the transition players, Phil, I think we both have McKay and Weiss on this team because they got the deals. Do you have anybody else? You got Connor Farrell, who currently still has a deal, who's listed under a transition player, but who else do you have as your transition player, if anybody?
No one.
Okay, this is where we differ. Now, originally, when we drafted the Panther City Lacrosse Club team, I had Josh Medeiros on this team. Now, it sounds like they're going away from that, and I would bet money right now that draft is not happening because it was going to happen on Tuesday. So, Josh Medeiros, congratulations, you stick with North Carolina or Panther City, whatever you want to call it. This is where it gets a little bit more tough because the draft has yet to happen. This is where I'm putting a first-round draft pick on this team. Now, a lot of people are going to be saying, hey, Connor Farrell's a transition player. Why don't you have him on this team? I don't have him on this team regardless because of what I did with the defense coming up. So right now I have McKay, Nick Weiss, and one of their first-round draft picks making this team as a transition player because what Phil and I have been craving for a long time, you need another transition player that's growing behind Ian McKay. I think having them in this type of role who could also be the healthy scratch on those game days as one of the 2 healthy scratches, I think a first-round draft pick as a transition player would fit perfectly on my 21-man roster.
I do like it. I do think they do need more transition players. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what they do with the bajillion draft picks they have, and if a player like you just mentioned doesn't kind of pan out for them, I do think a draft pick could be potentially in the wings. I do like the idea. They just really lack in that department, and it's something that we've been asking for forever, and we thought Dylan Robinson might step into that role, and it didn't seem like he really did. He's a fantastic player, really good defender, but he didn't really seem to step up into the transition role that he showed in his rookie season that we thought he might be able to. So I think we both kind of thought he might have been the new transition defender kind of player, and now he seems to be more of a stay-at-home defender with, a guy who can run up the ball if he needs to, but not that true transition player. So I would still love them to add somebody in that department.
So we'll move forward to the defense now, and this is a spot where not only us, but Steve Dietrich also said that there could be a lot of change in this department. And, there might not be as much change as we thought because there's already 7 guys, or 8 guys, I should say, and if you want to include 9 with Justin Robinson receiving a qualifying offer, that already have a deal or something lined up. So I think we can all assume that there are 7 locked in here between you and me with Steve Priolo, Cam Wire, Zach Belter, Dylan Robinson, Justin Martin, Paul Dawson, and Matt Spanger. Do you have those same 7?
I had one of those players not making the team, even though he has a deal. And that's because I still just don't love Spanger.
Okay, that's fair. I originally did not have him making this team, and the only reason I do is because they signed him to a deal prior to free agency opening. If they would have done it when free agency opened, I would have thought, okay, maybe they saw what he was valued out there, or maybe they saw, hey, give him an opportunity to go play meaningful minutes elsewhere. But because they locked him in before this freeze, that's why I have him locked in.
I just feel like personally they can upgrade
Yeah.
in there somehow. So I don't have him making my roster versus possibly, hopefully, upgrading from that area.
So you only had 2 transition players, so can I assume that you have 10 defenders on your team?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, and it's because one of the players I originally had as transition, you're calling a defender, but I didn't want to bring him up until you wanted to bring him up, so I switched him to a defender.
Is he the same one that I have highlighted on my sheet?
Yeah, it's the one that we've been gunning for all off season that I would absolutely love and still really, really, really want.
Okay, so it's Tim Edwards, for those of you who have not been paying attention to the show. We are big Tim Edwards fans. I was mentioning him before the trade deadline last year, and they just traded for a different Colorado player, which was Paul Dawson, which ended up working anyways. But I still have the deal that I originally placed. I'm sending a 2024 second, which is Vancouver from the Cully deal, and a 2026 second, again, from the Vancouver deal. So really, you're not giving up any of your own picks to go get him. He's a very solid faceoff man who is also a very solid defender, and that's why I don't have Connor Farrell on this team, the original 21, because Tim Edwards does more than Connor Farrell does, and he can get the same amount of faceoff draws that a Connor Farrell does, and that's why I have him as my 8th defender.
Yeah, I had him originally as transition just because I'm used to seeing face-off guys as transition players. So he would have been my 3rd transition, but you had him on defense, and I figured we'd talk about him at the same time. So he is technically my 10th defender, but I would love him to join the team. Again, we've talked about it a lot this offseason, but if there is one department, I know it's kind of confusing, but we've talked about this kind of ad nauseum at this point. But if there's one department, I think the Bandits can truly help their team in a big way with a single player. It is the face-off guy, and it's not that Farrell did a bad job. It's that we don't like the idea of a face-off only kind of player. And if they can bring in a guy like Edwards who can win face-offs and also play solid defense in one single player, I think you have truly upgraded your roster, and that's what I am hoping they still do and kind of look for. And this is also something we've talked about a lot, and just the fact that Adler was a mid-season acquisition, Farrell was a mid-season acquisition. Like, they just seem to go into a season not really with a great plan of face-offs, then all of a sudden decide that they really want a face-off guy and go out and try to find whoever's left out there. Again, Farrell did perfectly fine. They won a championship with him on the team. He isn't a bad face-off player, but it's not the kind of player I would gravitate to or like. It's more of a Edwards who does face-offs and can also play the field a lot more.
Yeah, that's kind of what we talk so much about in the offseason as well. And I think you preferenced it perfectly, where it's not that Connor Farrell does a bad job at the job he does. We just want a more versatile player that isn't just taking up one of the 19 active bodies on game day, where he's just going out there for a 5-second shift and getting off the field. We want another guy, especially with all the injuries that we saw on the defensive end last year, where if you lose a guy, you're not just taking up one spot with just a guy who does one certain thing. You got a guy that can do that while also playing defense and puts up probably about the similar numbers. But who are your other 2 defenders that you're adding to this team?
My other 2 are LaRue, just simply being on the active roster because they talk very highly of him. Again, they've taken him from a forward to a defender, trying to find any way to get him to stick on this team. It sounds like he's progressing in that department, and he's still ridiculously young. But more than anything, they just always talk very highly of him, and the fact that they were willing to switch his position to make sure he finds a spot on this roster, they really like him. So I do think that he's going to start playing actively next year. And honestly, coming from a forward to a defender, I don't know necessarily his speed. We really haven't seen him a lot in general. He hasn't played a lot of games, but he could end up being that other transition type player. I mean, he came into the league as a forward, and now they've switched him to defense. He could be your true other style of McKay. I mean, maybe that's what they're building him to be. Clearly has the offensive ability. Now they're giving him the defensive ability, and maybe he will be a transition player moving forward for the Bandits.
Yeah, I do like that idea. I do have him on the team, but I have him on my practice squad. But I might have to reevaluate that with your thought about him being more of that transition role as well with his offensive background. I thought you were going to kind of twist it where he kind of knows the tendencies of the forward, but I like the idea of him in that transition game, and we kind of saw it a little bit in the very slim games that he played last year, but he was able to join the rush as well with that big body frame, and he's still very young. So I do not hate that idea. I think with their win now mindset, unless he is locked in and ready to go on the defensive end, I think you'd rather roll out the guy that you do have rather than him learning by trial and error, especially with another year of hopefully Mad Vince between the pipes. So who is your 10th defender you got?
At the same time, though, they did win a championship with 2 rookies and
Very
trial
true.
by fire. This one you don't have, and I don't know if he's still a free agent. I don't know if you've updated this since our last list. I didn't see any news on him. Is Hostrauser still out there?
He signed a 1-year deal with Toronto, so yeah,
Rats.
he's
gone. Okay, well, that was my other one. So I guess for now we will slot Spanger back in. The other one I actually did want, but we're trying to be as realistic as possible and less just hopeful throwing things to the wind. Jeff Cornwall was the other one I would really like the Bandits to bring in as a defender, but he's kind of in the Canadian West out there, so I don't know if he'd make the trip all the way to Buffalo. I do know his team in Calgary is in shambles, a bit of flux with him at 33. I don't know if he's going to want to necessarily roll that back now that the whole team is just pretty much disbanded to nothing. So I could see him wanting to jump ship, but I don't know if he's going to jump it all the way to Buffalo. But he is the other player I'd like. I just think he's a little more unrealistic, even though Buffalo did originally draft him way, way, way back. But now he's bounced around a few teams, all in kind of central Canada. So I don't know if he'd really make the trip over to Buffalo, but he'd be the other one if Hostrauser no longer available, like you just said. I would like a player like that, but if they can't go out and get another veteran defender, which is kind of what I was going after here, not someone who's Dawson age, but someone who's, mid-30s, putting up good numbers, can just be another solid defender for a championship caliber team was kind of what I was trying to slot in there. But, I don't know. I guess for now, outside of Cornwall, we'll throw Spanger back in there.
Yeah, my ninth defender here. Sorry, my voice just went there.
Are we both dying? What is happening?
They've got 2 first-round picks, or I'm sorry, 3 first-round picks. They got their own New York's, which is, I believe, 7th, 8th, 7th, 8th, whatever it is, and then Rochester's pick. I think they have 7th and 8th. So there you go. They have Rochester and New York. Both of them are 7th and 8th, and then they have New York's, or their own, which is 15th. So they got 7, 8, and 15. So they're going to use these first-round picks more than likely. I have the other first-round pick being another defender, really loading up on the back end, and you can go with Wires, Belter, Dylan Robinson, and then whoever this other first-round pick is, and have a solid base back there to go with your, in your prime forwards there. So that's currently who are my 9 defenders. We both have Priolo, Wires, Belter, Dylan Robinson, Justin Martin, Paul Dawson, and Matt Spanger, along with Tim Edwards, and you added Sam LaRue in there. I have a first-round pick. So our goaltenders, I'm assuming Mad Vince and Steve Orleman.
Yeah, those are the 2. I really wanted to throw Higgins in here for you.
Goaltenders, man, do not roll with it. But that completes the 21. Phil, who is on your practice squad? I think we can both assume that it's Evan C. is one of the 4 spots.
It is. Evan C., Justin Robinson, who got that qualifying offer. I added because I really have always liked this player, and he just made the U.S. national team. So clearly, he's still very good. Dalton Silver made my practice squad. He's been one of our favorites on this podcast. He's just an incredible shutdown defender, and again, just made the U.S. national team. So clearly, he's still got the ability. So I do have him making the practice squad. I've liked him a lot and do think he'd be great depth for the defense. And then the other one I do have is a rookie forward making the team on the practice squad, someone that they would draft.
100%. I have Evan C., Justin Robinson as well. I have Sam LaRue down there, like I already mentioned. And then my other third first-round pick here is going to be a forward, whether it be a righty or a lefty. I want one of those young guys developing down there because they don't have a red shirt type of year, so I'm having him on my practice squad. But I guess we both left off in Adam Bomberry. We both left off Connor Farrell, Corey Highfield, Emerson Clark, Frank Brown, Bryce Sweeting. We left off last year's draft picks in Jake Rosa and Kellen Polera. So there is some change over here. Now again, there are openings that could be on the holdout list. There could be injuries. So a lot of these players could be brought back on deals. This is just the initial before free agency even opens, what our own 21 plus 4 roster would look like. So how do you think we did, Phil? Is there any other changes or other names out there to kind of look out for before free agency kind of opens on Monday? I mean, I'll toss out Chad Tutton. If there's a way they can bring in Chad Tutton, I would love that. Damon Edwards, another veteran piece back there, but also I'm trying to go with what Steve Dietrich has said in the past, where he wants to try to bring in some more younger players to add to this veteran core that they already have to kind of not rebuild, but also add fresher faces to a team that's growing. So once the older regime ages out, there's already that next wave coming in where they don't have to learn the Bandit way.
Yeah, you mentioned, I'm trying to find it in your old notes that I'm using. Give me one sec. This isn't the right notes. Jensen, right? Was that the other?
Taylor Jensen, yep.
Yeah, so a player like that, very similar to what you were just saying, more of a younger top defender that you'd have to throw some decent draft picks at Rochester to, who now is no longer owned by the Pagulas, thank goodness.
Quote,
so we don't have to worry. What?
Quote, unquote. Not official,
yeah.
Quote, unquote.
Quote unquote, no longer owned by the Pagulas. Hopefully they got an official new owner, so it's, not one owner owning two teams, which just seems weird to me. But that kind of player, I think he's 26, solid defender, up and coming, needs a new deal and everything, but he's the kind of player. He got a new deal. I lied. But that kind of player, that idea. So I do, as much as I liked the Cornwall and Hostrauser, like 33, 32, solid defender, can come in and just immediately impact a championship team and just keep them kind of where they are. And that is, a championship team just kind of really hold. That's the only issue I have with a younger player or these draft picks. Like you mentioned, it's absolutely great to look towards the future. You need to at all times, even if you are winning back-to-back championships, going for 3 in a row, you still need to look toward the future. So I'm perfectly fine with them bringing in a draft pick to build behind, and even Warriors and Belter. I mean, we just mentioned it a few minutes ago, huge parts of this championship team, and they were both rookies. So it's not like it can't be done. So, I mean, I think it would be good to bring in some youth instead of maybe an older free agent, but I could see them doing that as well if they really want to just stabilize the entire team and that back end, similar to what they did with Dawson. Again, I don't really necessarily need someone of that age because he's already doing exactly what you'd want a player like that to do. So I don't think you need more than him doing that. But that kind of idea, and like you said, it'll be just, I don't know, it'll be interesting to see what happens when free agency opens, when trades open. I mean, they have, 2 weeks pretty much to get their trades in before the draft, and then you have the draft, and There's a lot for GMs and teams to figure out in 2 weeks with free agency restarting, trades restarting. 2 weeks later, you have a draft. That's a lot to go through. I know, obviously, this whole time they've had time to make some kind of random game plan and, kind of strategize and figure out what they might want to do. But once it all opens and things start dropping, plans get thrown out the window immediately. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens. But I think the biggest thing that you and I have talked about a ton and kind of figured out with this little exercise again, there's no room on this roster for anybody. I know it's upsetting, I guess, for the amount of draft picks they have and everything of that nature. But when you're a championship team, 4 straight you've gone to, you've won 2 in a row, you don't have to rewrite the script when it's working. And this team is working really well. And I mean, even with the guys we have highlighted, you brought in 2 players and then some draft picks? I brought
one player.
I brought in one player and some draft picks. Like, it just goes to show, like, there is just no room on this team unless there's a trade that happens, which could happen. Like you said, Dietrich mentioned that the back end might lose some guys that they aren't thrilled about losing, but you kind of need to move on from. And Bomberry, I think, would be the number one that comes to mind, that they've been on the team for a little bit, made a big impact, won a couple of championships, but maybe they move on from him. But maybe we see a trade go down with one of these back end players to get somebody else in. So it'll be interesting, but I just, as the, I don't know, fantasy fan in me wants to see a bunch of trades go down and fun draft picks and all that kind of stuff. A team like this just does not have an overly exciting offseason because they don't need to.
Yeah, for real quick, Taylor Jensen, 1-year deal a few weeks ago. I had that deal lined up before he landed that new deal. Now, that's not saying that they can't trade him, because currently they have 29 players under contract, one of the biggest teams that are kind of locked in. They locked up all their UFAs and RFAs and everybody else real quick. But yeah, I wouldn't be shocked to see a deal from Rochester just because of all the contracts they still currently have. But them giving him a deal kind of took me out of that equation. For the the Bandits, like you were saying, they still have 10 draft picks, 3 first-round picks, and a second-round pick as well, an early second-round pick. So I can see Dietrich being very active. Like you said, it's around 2.5 weeks until the draft happens, and then it's like 3 months until the season even starts. So everything is going to be coming at you real quick. With free agency opening on Monday, there's going to be a ton of news. Keep track. We'll try to do our best to keep updated, but don't expect the Bandits to do a ton, because like you just said, their roster is pretty much stacked. We built this roster, and we have 3 first-round. I have 3 first-round picks added to this. One of them on the practice squad, and I got 1 trade coming in. I have them bringing back Bucky. I have them bringing back Braden Robinson. But beyond that, there's not a ton of room on this team whatsoever. We've been saying that for the 4 years we've been covering this team. But yeah, there's going to be some change over here, but it's because the team is just so stinking stacked. But that will conclude this episode, one of our longer ones, and it's going to keep doing that until we go to 2 weeks, and even then it's going to be longer ones. But on our next show, we got our Bills bold predictions for the season. We'll be covering free agency. Fingers crossed that it actually opens on Monday. I really do think it's going to be happening. What's going on with Panther City? Any other news that drops in the NL, we will break that down on our next Wednesday show. So thank you all for listening to another episode of the Buffalo Sports Collective. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on X and Blue Sky at Buffalo Sports Co. You can visit our website at buffalosportscollective.com. Check out our store on our link tree on our socials, or at the shop tab at the top of our website. Follow our channel wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you leave us a review on Apple and Spotify. Until next time, bye-bye.